I'd like to welcome Jeff with LK Soccer out of Chicago, a part of the Little Kickers franchise umbrella. And with that, I'd like to say good morning, Jeff, and would love to let you do a quick introduction. Tell us a little bit about LK Soccer.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. I appreciate you having me on this morning. My name's Jeff Halsema. I am the Vice President of Programming for LK Soccer, which is a franchisee of Little Kickers and Skills Institute. We run out of the Chicago and Milwaukee areas. Right now, we have 17 locations that we're currently running. We're just closing up our summer session, so location 18 is closing up for the year. And we go back down to 17. We run indoor and outdoor locations in both areas, Milwaukee and Chicago. OK Soccer is it's a company name for Little Kickers and Skills Institute. Little Kickers is a national organization. It is a child development theme. We run classes for kids 18 months all the way up to could be 8, 9 years old in Little Kickers. Variety of class types and has a theme kind of revolving around soccer. It's the what I would call the indirect secret sauce to the child development piece. It keeps it interesting. It keeps it entertaining. We also run what's called Skills Institute. Skills Institute is more of a soccer program that we run for kids ages 5 through 12. Around the country, a variety of skill levels, a variety of age classes, still focusing on that child development piece, but more of a soccer focus in the Skills Institute classes. So from a location standpoint, we are the largest franchisee in the country. And then from a participant standpoint, we're the second largest franchisee in the nation.
Awesome. Thanks for the overview there. And I do have your
Yeah.
website up here for folks that are able to access video here. And you have kids, right, Jeff?
I do not have kids.
Okay. Yeah. But you've been in the Chicago area for a while.
Yeah, so I've lived and grown up in the suburbs ever since I was born. My background is actually more of a competitive soccer background. Right after college, got into coaching at a pretty competitive level. Ended up starting working at Dominican University, a Division III school, just outside the city with the women's program. Eventually switched back over to the men's program. Worked up through the administrative piece as well. Became an assistant athletic director, and after about 14, 15 years, just kind of got burned out. Needed a new challenge and wanted to enjoy life outside of work a little bit as well. So started looking for some other options. And eventually, over time and a couple stops, came across LK Soccer. One of the facilities I was working in, I got them in a suburb of the city. That was new and was a new location for them. So I met Brian Lofton, who is our owner of LK Soccer, and also at the time was the president, Gary Lindsay, to do a rental with them and a contract to have Little Kickers run out of the facility. And after a couple more stops, ended up coming back to them and got a position with LK Soccer and went through the whole COVID, the whole pandemic with them, and then opened back up when we were ready to go. And now we're kind of back full steam with 17 locations.
Yeah, so kind of that transition, I always love to hear, and I think for a lot of people in this space, right, who end up, finding that, that happy place, that role within a franchise or a sports facility or business, where they once were a coach, or they once were the athlete, or they once were, assistant athletic director, similar to your transition from, sort of that institution where you're working with, more competitive, a little bit older athletes, right, to devoting your time and energy and really career to this youth athlete space, and kind of what that transition's been like, and kind of the pros and cons of making that change to working with kids at Little Kickers.
Yeah, it was, I'm going to be honest, it was a little scary at first because I had been with pretty competitive, highly competitive athletes for as long as I was, and older as well, college age athletes as well. So getting back into, the littlest, the starting age was daunting, but quickly realized that can have so much of a greater impact on littler kids than on older kids. You can shape an experience within a matter of one 50-minute class. You can spark something that just kind of clicks with them, whether it's, from one week to the next week, seeing a 2-year-old able to, fake taking a hop over a pool noodle to then kick a soccer ball, to actually taking a hop over the pool noodle and figure out what that means for them and what that's like. Even with some of the older kids, teaching 3 and 4-year-olds how to start scrimmaging and how it's okay to play in a non-competitive space and have fun, and how competitive 3 and 4-year-olds just instinctually are. They want to score, they want to win. They haven't even been taught anything. It's just common sense for them to want to do that. So teaching them that it's okay to play and bump off of one another and fall down and get back up and get those instincts going. The other fun piece that now I'm in a little bit more is, we're trying to inspire younger kids to enjoy soccer for the first time ever, to explore their physical prowess to their social prowess, their emotional prowess, cognitive function, and training them and training their mind on how to do things repetitively week after week the right way. Class readiness, getting them ready for preschool or pre-K or kindergarten, whatever that might be, and helping with those challenges that a lot of people have in today's day and age. But now the space that I work a lot with, not so much hands-on in the class sector, but from what we would call inside our company, is the leadership aspect of things. So our company, for the most part, I would say, if we've got 150 employees, I'm probably going to say 130 to 135 of them are under the age of 22. Again, back working with the high school, college age kids and shaping them from a leadership standpoint to understand what it's like to run a business, what it's like to lead other people, to manage staff. If we've got 17 locations, I believe we have 8 full-time coordinators. So we've got part-time, college kids and high school kids, running locations on the weekends, being the front of LK Soccer in front of customers, parents, kids, signing them up, evaluating coaches, giving them feedback. So teaching them all of those things from a leadership standpoint is really, really essential kind of in this space on scale to be able to run as many locations as we can.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely something that it's easy to forget that you do work with that teenager, college athlete who in some cases may not even still be an athlete, but you're giving them this whole other opportunity to mentor and train younger kids, right? And you mentioned that in terms of leadership development, that's easy actually for me to forget. When we sit down and have our normal weekly conversations on AI and data, in the actual business, it's easy to just think in the mindset of, oh, you serve ages 1 to 8, 9, 10, up to 12, and maybe in some cases beyond. But really, there's a whole side of the business that we don't talk about that often, which is these adolescents, these teenagers and college kids who get to be mentors, like you said, and build leadership skills. And I know we'll talk some about core values and things here in a second too. But I have to ask because I know a lot of people often ask, 1-year-old, okay, that's pretty young to start in sports. I have a 9-year-old, 6-year-old, 2-year-old, so I get it. I'm also in sports. But what's your sort of story, or how do you when somebody asks that question, like, do you really start at 1, and kind of what's the point and value of starting there for a parent?
So 18 months, so 1.5 is
Okay.
our earliest class we'll get them in. Our younger classes,
parents aren't trying to play, age their kids up at 0.
Oh, they always are. They always are, Kevin. They always are. We've got 3 classes, our 1.5 to 2-year-old class, our 2 to 3-year-old class, and then we have a 2.5 to 3.5-year-old class. They are what we call parent-child classes. So all parents or one parent per kid, if both parents come, have to be in class at all times. So the coach will run the class. So the first thing it's about is, especially at that youngest age, it's really about exploration. So, getting them to understand that there are other kids in the class, how to socialize, appropriate behavior, shapes, colors, sizes. We use all kinds of different equipment for them to get to understand different shapes, different colors, textures, sounds. We'll really bubbles, is a big thing in the bunnies class where we'll do some games with bubbles to understand hand-eye coordination and how to pop a bubble, while they're running around. So that's the first thing it's about. It's really about that exploration into those senses that they're developing at that age. And we'll repeat the same curriculum every week in that youngest class. We won't start to build until they get into the 2-year-old class and the 3-year-old class. So it's about repetition so that they're cognitively programming and teaching themselves over 7-week, 9-week, 10-week, 11-week, whatever the session is, how to achieve these things. And then they're building confidence in it as well. The second piece to that is the parent-child relationship. So obviously people are always like, well, I'm at home with my kid all the time. I'm always building relationship. But this is a different setting. So you're actually in a public class type setting where the games are being run for you. Our coaches are trained and should be teaching you what the function and the key aspect of each one of those games is so that you can work and develop that relationship with your kid, not in the traditional distractions of home. There could be music, there could be other kids running around, there could be the TV on, whatever it might be. But in a crucial one-on-one, you are 50 minutes focused, just you and your kid, doing these different activities in these different games and really bonding in a little bit more of a hyper-focused way. So that's kind of the gift we like to say we give. The parents who really buy into it and want to participate and fully engage are the ones I think see the biggest benefits with their kids being able to take those steps every week. But also in today's day and age, we always get those parents too that want to just have their kid run around and play and not have to be bothered for 50 minutes because they've got them 24/7. So we get those too. And that's where the coach relationship comes into play and being able to work their way around the class and engage with all of the kids at each game or each activity level. And then as we go up from there, we progressively build on certain skills. So that last parent-child, that 2.5 to 3.5-year-old class, which would be what we call our Cottontails class, we call that a transition class. So we will try and transition the kids or the parents off of the field at some point throughout the session to get them ready for that next class, which they're by themselves. So We're trying to create that buffer in that transition period to get them ready for that first independent class. So we're building a sense of independence in that class, which is pretty key.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so this is going to kind of get us into the meat of our conversation because you've got, amazing repeat customers really from every age group, the starting age group, 18 months upwards. You also have a number of locations, as you mentioned early on, in the introduction. What is it like managing all of that, data? And when I mean data for folks, because this is a type of conversation I have every day, but you've got to manage, how one location is doing over another, right? Do you have enough inbound leads coming in? Do you have enough repeat buyers? Do you have enough coaches, right? Staff, the adolescent, teenager, college kid helping coach for your busy seasons. In some cases, you have indoor versus outdoor locations. And obviously when it gets cold in Chicago, we know we're going indoors. So just help our listeners wrap their head around, kind of what that's like. Because you guys do a lot of business and there's a lot happening all at once and it can be overwhelming.
Yeah. So I would say coming into it and kind of learning the ropes, it was honestly, it was overwhelming. The Google spreadsheet centric, which for anybody that works in Google spreadsheets can be extremely time consuming with formulas and coding and trying to update things on a weekly, daily, monthly, seasonally, session wise. I mean, you're constantly in a spreadsheet doing updates. So at times it was chaos. At times it's overwhelming, especially at the end of a session when you're trying to wrap up or the beginning of a session when you're trying to start and kick off. Planning, if you want to plan for a future location, if you want to plan on running, different types of classes and making changes, it takes time, a lot of time, sometimes days, even weeks. And in our business, you have to be more efficient if you're running 17 locations. I like to tell people, just think of it as this. Okay. If you've got a small little whatever you're doing, it could be, you could be, if I was a college coach, I do things one time a year during
Yeah.
the season. If it's, an athletic director, and you've got to do things one time a year for the school, retention of athletes, whatever it might be. I go, okay, think of that. Okay, now I have to do it 17 times and I have to do it 5 times a year because we run 5 sessions.
Yeah.
I'm doing 17 things, everything 17 times because we want to do it by location and we want to do it comparably by session because we don't want to ever compare a winter to a summer session. We want to compare apples to apples. So the data in terms of what we're talking about is overwhelming. It was overwhelming. And that's where, upper hand really came in the last 6 months with our initial conversations and has truly helped.
Yeah. Well, and we do see Excel, Google Sheets. I mean, that is everyone's using those platforms, obviously, to some degree, right? And I would say you guys, one thing we learn in meeting new prospective clients or existing, or just talking to anyone in this space is the ones that are set up for success are the ones that are not just using Google Sheets or Excel, but they're doing it diligently. And I would say you definitely use Google Sheets diligently, right? So for the business to understand the data that they're working with, to understand the metrics or KPIs they're wanting and needing to look at on a daily basis, that can't be understated enough because that's really the key to starting any data science AI project, right? Is you got to understand the data. You got to know where it's coming
Yeah.
from, how you're getting to your answers and your formulas, et cetera. And I think you guys have done a great job, but I think that's hard. A lot of people think, oh yeah, I need to do that, but they don't have the, I don't know if it's the stamina or maybe they just think, like you said, going through the minutia of updating those spreadsheets every day. She's like, gosh, I got to do this again. You're kind of helping validate. You've got to do that. If you don't have the money or time to invest in AI and data science yet, at least you could be doing what you were doing, right? To put yourself in a position to take advantage of future AI and data opportunities.
Yeah, you have to be able to make decisions based off of you know things that you have readily available that you can make decisions off of. Like you have to have numbers to be able to make decisions to do something or not do something. If you don't take the time to put those things together in a spreadsheet or be able to compare session over session or year over year, you're blind guessing. And
Mhm.
I really believe you're setting yourself up for failure if you're blind guessing.
Yeah.
You can't succeed without knowledge and without information to back up your decision.
Yeah. Now, when you moved into this role, several years ago, but what what kind of spreadsheets were you coming into? Were you coming into stuff that had already been developed? Did you kind of take that on as like, all right, this is first 90 days, sort of first few projects, we're going to be whatever platform you're on. Now you're going to really start to dig into the data yourself. Again, I think this is helpful for anybody listening who might be in that situation where maybe they've got they've been on the same platform for a long time. And I'm not a huge fan of people playing musical chairs with software and registration, right? It's
Yeah.
very disruptive to a business. And so in a lot of cases, just get the most out of what you have is a much better first step than switching software. And so for people that are on a platform and they move into this role, right, and that business has been using it for a while, any advice you can give on, kind of, man, how do you just tackle, all right, hey, I'm gonna create some spreadsheets. Like, where do you start?
Yeah. I came in, so as the vice president, I took over, I mean, we're almost 2 years. So there were platforms set up, there were spreadsheets set up. So my first set of advice is understand what you're working with and use it and figure out, does it work for you and your style? So I just worked with what we had. I worked with what was previously set up and quickly came to understand that if I want to get into leadership development and planning different types of leadership training for our coordinators, for our site leads, for our mentor coaches, redeveloping that what we would call leadership pipeline that I've
Yeah.
had some help with from some other people within the company. I can't be spending time every day, 3-4 hours, just updating spreadsheets. That's not my role. So I quickly had to realize that although this is working, it's not efficient. It's not effective
Mhm.
for me. So, in meeting with Brian, it was, one of my goals was how can we automate as much as we possibly can? How
Mhm.
can we set things up to where we're automatically updating spreadsheets, or spreadsheets are automatically updating themselves and pulling information if possible. So that was one of my goals. And, being 2 years in, obviously upper hand is a huge piece of that automation, but I tried to work and automate as many things as I possibly could to where it wasn't hunting and finding information or pulling up a spreadsheet, having to pull numbers from our other platforms that we utilize and input them into the spreadsheet. It was really a matter of being more effective and efficient so that I could get into what I deemed more important functions for the company.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And then when it comes to that reporting, so you get your spreadsheet set up, you're kind of in the role. How do you communicate with each location, knowing you can't be everywhere, at the same time, and having 17, 18 locations, it's a lot. So curious how you use data to help communicate, or is there a cadence that you like to meet with folks at each location to go over data, and then is there a typical data set or set of KPIs that you like to review with everybody to measure how the business is doing, to be able to know when to step in and help where it's needed?
So we have a group weekly leadership meeting. We do meet once a week as a group to go over it's more of an operation standpoint with 17 locations. Are we getting things to each location that need to be handed out or need to be passed out? Do all the locations have enough uniforms? Do they have enough what we call free trial passports, which I'll tell you about in the KPI section. So it's really an operational function. Are we covered for birthday parties, things like that? So it's a once a week, 1 hour meeting. We will do some review of some of the data, but we also do that in individuals. We try to have a quick check-in with every coordinator. So that's every full-time person once a week, 30 minutes, just a quick check-in. We'll set an agenda every week of things that we want to talk about so they come prepared. We used to not get our coordinators involved in a lot of the data, and being able to read it, analyze it, tell us what it means, what are they thinking, how to move forward. And now we're at a point where we are having them come prepared with talking points based around data. So one data set would be we offer what's called a free trial class. So anybody who wants to try out Little Kickers, LK Soccer, can go on the website, sign up for a free class, and take one free class to see whether it works for them, and they want to register. So we do a lot of data around free trials. Who shows up, who registered on site, who maybe registered on the back end when they went home on the web. How many no-shows did we have? What's that percentage of no-shows? Who do we need to, we'll take notes for those people that didn't register and showed up to do follow-up calls, within 48 hours, because that is technically a hot lead now, somebody that came. So we'll do a lot of data around our free trials. What's our closing rate? Two things for our business, to grow is, can you keep and maintain your current customers? So our retention, and can you get new customers in the door? Our closing rate, our free trials. We'll even compare month over month, what the free trials are doing at every location. How many are coming? How many are registering? Do we have to change our marketing? Do we have to change our Google advertising in certain locations to spend a little bit more? Because, we've got less free trials, month over month, and we're on the decline. Are there places that are performing, extraordinarily well, but we're not closing them when they come on site? So that shapes some of the conversations we have in the one-on-ones. Retention, we talk about a lot. Obviously, the other piece that I talked about is retention. Can you keep your current customers session over session? So what are we doing from a retention standpoint? How are we targeting, when registration for a new session opens? How are we targeting those customers? How are we tracking who signed up versus who hasn't signed up, so that we're continuously building relationships with customers and parents on a week-to-week basis. But if a couple customers have signed up, how can we target the ones that haven't signed up to make sure that we're making a point to remind them that registration is open? That was a big push this past weekend. Revenue, we always talk revenue, expenses, things like that is tracked as well. But from a coordinator standpoint of running their location, we really, really focus on retention and our free trials and free trial closing rate.
And you guys do well with free trial. I mean, well above what I think is standard in the industry. So it's definitely fun to see those numbers coming through.
Yeah. We always, we try to we really do try to aim at a higher standard when we talk about whether it's closing them on site or closing them, through a follow-up phone call or them
Mhm.
signing up online. We do aim pretty high when it comes to the industry standard, and I think that's one of the reasons we continuously can gain and attract new customers, is because we've got some processes in place that allow us to specifically focus on that clientele that comes through.
Yeah. Does your gut tell you you get more a higher close rate when you try to close on site versus follow up? And do you think, what your gut tells you without, looking at the data? I'm sure you probably know. And I imagine the on site close rate's
On
much
site,
higher.
yeah, if you can get them on site, obviously it's more likely to get them on site if you can get them on site. So we'll typically, I mean, we try to shoot for about 40% on site that same day. Then we'll end up somewhere as a company, month to month in the 60% range. So if we can get 40% on site and then through follow-ups or just natural online registrations capture another 20,
Yeah.
that's a pretty key indicator of a healthy close rate.
Yeah. I would agree. So on the kind of coming back to the data science and AI stuff, I mean, coming into, working with Upper Hand AI, and it doesn't have to be specific to us, really just for folks that are out there. Obviously the talk about AI, ChatGPT, OpenAI, Midjourney, Llama, Claude, you name Gemini, you name. We could create a list of tools for the next 40 minutes.
Yep.
Of everything you can use. From your role and your position, having done this for so long, I mean, what's your take on what AI is doing and the impact it's having on our day to day?
So one of the big things for me that my owners taught me is you got to take time to make time. Us taking the time to be able to utilize Upper Hand to make real time, real world decisions without having to spend hours upon days upon weeks researching. We're right now, I would still say we're in the taking time to make time. We're just
Hmm.
starting to understand. I truly appreciate that everything is a one-stop shop now. And we haven't even, I think, really hit the tip of the iceberg yet with what we could possibly do from the predictive side of
Hmm.
making even more informed decisions. We're still trying to, get our real world data that we utilize on a daily basis. We're just now starting to dip into the predictive analytics of being able to mesh some of these numbers that we have and get them to learn and work off of one another. But for us, being able to see this, at the tip of our fingers without having to do a search and spend minutes looking, it's all in one dashboard. I can click between the dashboards, I can filter it, and boom, it's right there to be able to look at and update. I can do comparisons for revenue. I can do comparisons for retention. I can do employee coaching retention. So like what coaches at Bradley Place are high in retention and which ones are lower.
Hmm.
Okay. Then we can then break that even down even further to say, okay, how long have these coaches worked and what are their session over session retention rates? And okay, now I can talk to my Bradley coordinator and say, hey, how have we evaluated? What's the feedback we given to these coaches? Look at their retention over the past 3 sessions. And, you know, unfortunately, we don't want to be the company that fires people, but it is a job. And, we are in a business of retaining customers and getting customers to sign up and getting the best product out there as possible. So,
Yeah.
if we've had a number of conversations and we've done a number of coaching evaluations, it's time to have a different conversation with said coach. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's also on the flip side. You've got a coach that's super high over the past couple sessions. They're retaining a good percentage of their kids, well over 50% every session. They're just coaching right now. Maybe that's a key indicator where we should be moving them through as a mentor coach or even as a site lead to get them some more responsibility and, maybe even a higher pay rate for them to make a little more money.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do love the way you guys look at retention of employees and the staff and clients coming back to work with those staff members. You guys really dig into a lot of metrics that help find ways to help your staff, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like you said, you're in the business of retaining clients and delivering a great user experience. And really, at the end of the day, you're dealing with very very delicate people. I mean, these are
Yeah.
18-month olds. So you want that first experience with soccer to be a great one, and soccer is
Yeah.
in a position to do that better than any other sport, really. And I think it's hard to argue that. But
Now
predictive
to the
side, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, even now to the point where from as we start to get into, like you said, you were mentioning predictive side, as we start to get into that, we're starting to look at census data in certain areas when it comes to, what are some birth rates, what are the ages of the families and specific zip codes where we have locations and surrounding those zip codes around certain locations. What are drive times within certain locations to find out, have people matriculated out of what we would call our bubble around our location and into different areas to where then we need to change our marketing, or we need to change our strategy, or even in the end we need to move our location potentially, or find
Yeah.
what we would call a satellite to offer based off of that location, a little bit of a satellite location to capture some of those customers that may have moved out of that bubble. So being able to have demographic information, census information, drive time information that we've been working on, and plug that into zip codes specifically. Right now, we've really just done our city areas. We haven't gotten to
Yeah.
the suburbs, but being able to dive into that a little bit without, I mean, I can just tell anybody who's listening, if you've ever tried to dive into that on the census page and do that, it's going to take you weeks to create the information needed to do that. And I've got it all. I've got every city zip code all at the tip of my hand. So it's just parsing it away based off of the location I'm looking at.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really been really fun to see some of the drive times for your clients, and kind of comparing that to some of the census data when I look in at LK Soccer's AI dashboard, which is really cool. On the predictive side, and obviously we're not going to give away some of the fun details, but I am excited about what I've seen as it relates to predicting free trial conversions, retention rates, things of that nature. Where if you buy it, where do you see AI taking you? What types of problems do you hope to see AI help solve for you in the LK Soccer business over the next year, 2 years, as AI continues to proliferate in our industry?
Yeah, the biggest thing I think that we're super excited for, and it's definitely longer term because you really have to mesh a bunch of different numbers and learn off of a bunch of different numbers. But every session, when we have to create a class schedule, if you really want to create the most efficient class schedule based off of kids moving up a class or aging out of a class, or, you know, over the course of a year, you might have to totally flip your schedule because there's just different age kids in the neighborhood. It really is, I said earlier, that is one of the things that really is sometimes, just trying to take a dart and blindly throw it at a dartboard. Um, there is a way to manage it and do it, but sometimes it is a blind shot. I think long-term big picture is taking all of these things that we've added into our dashboards and being able to automatically predict what your location schedule should be based off of past customers, age of those customers, have they aged out of class, how many classes have they taken, starting to include some of the demos that are in the last census data. I think we can get to a world where every session it's telling us exactly what classes we should run at 8:30, what classes we should run at 9:30, and what classes we should run at 10:30 based off of customers that have registered, what we've taken over the last couple sessions, and all of that information that is already there and available to us without having to look
Yeah.
at it. Um,
Yeah, I do not think we're far off that.
coordinators are not, it's one of the things where I'm like, I don't want them having to be in data. I don't want them have to be analyzing numbers when they are the front facing customer side of the business. They should be working on relationships, training coaches, training site leads, training mentor coaches, working with the kids. I don't want them having to spend, 2, 3, 4 days a session on what classes they should have to run.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. I think we're closer and closer to that in AI generally, not just in sports, but with scheduling. And it's kind of revealing how difficult scheduling is. That AI hasn't just, it's not like it'll be the last thing it solves, not the
Yeah.
first, because it's so, you're dealing with date, time, and all these different pieces that play into one of the most challenging areas and aspects of development when it comes to coding is date time, and associating those date times to resources, people, and moving schedules. And language learning models today aren't the best at solving some of that, but it's getting closer and closer as people think about how do we use language learning models and potentially graph databases and other things to do quick searches that are very, very complex, but do them quickly. So
Yeah, even to be able to look at a schedule that we make or that we have out there and just
yeah,
look at based off of previous sessions, registrations, number of per classes, and an occupancy rate. Hey, you need to offer another field space to really make use of potential growth, or
yeah,
you don't have enough room to grow, you need another field space, or even better yet, cut back because you're spending too much money and costs for the number of kids you have. You can condense these and move these around and maybe profit a little bit more by cutting back on a field
yeah,
location or field space.
totally agree. Awesome. Well, I mean, anything else that has surprised you with data science and AI in general, or anything else you've learned that you'd want to share? Otherwise, you're kind of coming up on our full time here.
Yeah. I think the most interesting thing that I've learned is just, the ability to pull information out of a source and teach it to read it a certain way,
Mhm.
teach it to enter it a certain way. I think one of the things that, I was a little wary about was, I would say, the term how dirty our spreadsheets were
Mhm.
potentially.
Yeah,
And the fact that you can really tell it and rename it whatever you need to understand it or get it to understand, because what we call something might not be called the same thing, how upper hand lingo or day smart lingo or whatever source you're working with. But,
Mhm.
you can tie that all together to be able to get to the end result. There really are no like limits. I always thought there were going to be limits, and there really are no limits. There's always a way to reshape things as needed. I
Yeah.
think that's been the biggest surprise for me is I'm a creature of habit, so being able to look at things visually a certain way, I
Hmm.
thought I was going to have to retrain my eye in some of the dashboards or some of the ways I looked at things. And no, they've been recreated to look exactly the way I'm visually looking at it in my old model. It's
Hmm.
just a newer version and a much more efficient version.
Yeah, that's great to hear. It definitely helps kind of that transition too from what you've been doing. And honestly, you did a great job with those spreadsheets. And anybody we've worked with, it always goes well when you're working with a business that knows their business very well, knows the data, has the data accessible. It's a 9-day difference from the opposite of that, as you might imagine. So
Yeah,
you guys are a pleasure to work with and doing great things for the community. So
we have absolutely loved our relationship with you guys, and can't wait to continue to take the next steps and in cracking some of the things that Little Kickers and OK Soccer has been trying to crack for, honestly, since we've started.
yeah, yeah. Well, and I think that also for people listening, a lot of times AI, predictive analytics can be, I want to do that, but it's so foreign, and people forget that 95% of the work is kind of what we've been doing the last 6 months, right? Cleaning the data, getting it, piping it in, and getting our team to understand it too, right? So,
Yeah,
we always say in school, data scientist is worthless if they don't understand the data they're working with, right? And it's so true because it changes what scientific methods do you use to analyze your model. What model do you pick based on the type of data you're dealing with or what you're trying to predict and do. So it's been fun for me to see our team, some younger folks, some older with more experience, but just sort of to see the depth that they've had to learn how to help and the types of questions they have to ask you and Brian and the team to build their models. And I think we've got some fun, exciting stuff to show. I know you've seen part of it, but it's a process. It's not, just flip a switch, you're ready to go.
absolutely, absolutely. That's been the fun part too, is the process, because
Yeah.
I've also learned a lot about how I communicate. The language barrier between me and a data scientist is different. So I always go back and say, okay, well, I think I need to word this differently. I'm not sure they're picking up on
You're
this.
getting
So
it.
the whole front end back end thing has been a learning process. But yeah, you guys have been fantastic and really a pleasure to work with.
Awesome. Well, appreciate it. And again, thanks. Thank you for joining, kind of talking through a few fun questions today.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.